And Marcel, one of our guests here. We are joining from the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Kwantlen, Katzie, Semiahmoo, and Swasin First Nations, who we know continue to support and sustain this land. We have the privilege of being able to zoom in from here, engage with you all from here, have these conversations, raise families, play, work, and all kinds of things on this beautiful land. So I'm acknowledging that there's a whole history that has come before us on the land that we're now on. And Aisha, our other guest here, also like to share where she's coming in from.
Sure. I would like to acknowledge the land that I get to live, learn, and to play on is on the treaty lands of the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. For thousands of years, Indigenous people has inhabited and cared for this land. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples. I'm grateful to give my respect to the first inhabitants of the land.
Thank you, Aisha. And we'd love to know where you are all coming in from. So please feel free to share in the chat where you're calling in from. Say hello. We'd like to know who's here, who's joining the conversation. And part of acknowledging where we're located is tied to who we are and what we're actually doing as part of these conversations in Kaiso careers. So Shelley, I'll let you share a bit more about that.
Okay, and before I do that, I just want to take a moment to let everybody know that we are recording this session. So we do post it on our YouTube. So if you don't want to be on it, just make sure you can turn off your camera. And also, if you do not mind, then you can keep your camera on. Okay, I guess my volume is not so good. Shalima, you're saying? How about now?
A little bit, yeah.
Is it better?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So as Shalima mentioned, when she gave the land acknowledgement, we're actually both born and raised here in the Turtle Island, Vancouver, Surrey kind of area. And our families are originally from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. And the name that we've chosen for this company, Kaiso Careers, actually comes from the music and the sounds of the Caribbean. So it's actually a merging of different cultures, the African, the Indian, the Spanish. It's a fusion of all these types of music that have come together in Trinidad and Tobago, which really encompasses the culture of our people. And the music was also used as a form of sharing messages amongst people through the music. So it was also a hidden way to communicate with others. So that's kind of how we decided to incorporate our culture into who we are when we formed this. So that's a little bit about us for that.
I think what's key there is, in sharing messages, that's tradition to do that. And so we wanted to bring that into our lives now and continue to share dialogue and understanding around our different experiences. One of the things that quite often we might face as people who are either Black, Indigenous, or people of color is we are often the only one within a organization or one of very few. And so the more that we could share our experiences, have dialogue around that, have conversations that could empower us and know that we're not the only ones having these types of experiences, the better we may feel and feel confident going through our lives. So that's what the space is for. And so today, we're really excited to have Aisha here and Marcel to talk about, again, like sharing of a dialogue around the different experiences that we have. And part of our focus today is around mental health and mental wellness. So we'll get more into that. We've already started a really great discussion before we even got onto here. So maybe let's just start with Aisha, if you want to share just a little bit about your background, and then Marcel will get the same from you and then get into some of the discussion that we already started.
Sure. I'll introduce myself. As Shalima said, my name is Aisha Wovenu. My pronouns are she, her. My background, I was born and raised here. My family, or I am also from Ghana, West Africa. I'm a registered social worker. In my 9 to 5, I am working with Carizon Family and Community Services that provides mental health and wellness services to individuals as well as their families. I also work as a clinical social worker and psychotherapist for private practice. And I do a lot of work as well with food security within the Jane and Finch and Black Creek community in North York, Ontario.
Great. Thanks so much, Aisha. Marcel, how about you?
Hi, my name is Marcel Cadogan, or Cadogan. I pronounce he, him. Currently, I'm a school counselor in one of the districts in BC, and I'm soon to be registered clinical counselor also myself. So, yeah, glad to be here though.
So, I mean, one of the things that we had started talking about was just the impact of being a person of color in the workplaces. And as both of you have that mental health background, that counseling background, what are you seeing in either the people that you're supporting or like even for yourselves as the impact of sometimes being the only one or having to be one of very few in the workplace?
What I'm seeing, I think, is I think we've always known like the importance of representation, but more so like now things have been brought out in the forefront. So being like having a seat at the table and but still not wanting to be the only one at the table, right? So when you look across the table, like, do you see other people that look like you? When you show up in the space, are you the only one? So those kind of things, I think, is what I've seen. Within counseling, I think over the past year, I've seen like just an increase in the amount of Black people that are actually seeking counseling services, which is really, really great. It hasn't always been that experience for me anyways with the populations that I've been serving. So I'm glad to see like a shift towards just that openness to seek mental health services. And I think a part of that too is because we're showing up, right? People of color are showing up as counselors, as therapists, as mental health workers, as different things that, resonates with those that are seeking services.
Yeah, for me, I would say like, as my roles changed throughout the years, because I've been in the school district for quite a while, but my roles has changed. And as I've changed in those roles, I felt more pressure. I feel like there's more of a responsibility. And so being in that situation, I have to be very cautious of my own mental health. It's very important to pay attention to your own mental health, because if you're not there, then it's really hard to make those changes or to speak up or to do things within your workforce. In my role, I'm working mainly with youth, so I'm seeing it's a little bit, I guess it's a little bit different working with youth as they're trying to learn about their mental health at the same time. And for me to be there to support them is huge. Being, from the BIPOC community and having somebody that they could see that feel like they could relate to is huge. And I also see it within the parents. Often when I send in a form and it's a consent form, parents might just see the name and might not be sure of who that other person who's talking to my child. And I've noticed like a bit of a resistance sometimes from the BIPOC community because of that trust issue. Is this person really going to support my kid the way my kid needs to be supported? So often I try to meet them outside. I try to see them face to face. And most times when they see me, they're like, oh, you're the counselor. Okay, where do I sign? It's a bit of that, I think you'll understand. I appreciate that having somebody that my son or my daughter could look up to, that could talk to and feel comfortable talking to, and know that that support is genuine. That it's not just going through the motions and whatnot.
Absolutely.
Marcel, you brought up a really good point just now when you mentioned about when the parents get a note from, you or from the school, and there might be a little bit of resistance. One of the things that we know particularly within our community and a lot of racialized communities, that there's a stigma behind the concept of getting support for mental health and wellness, because oftentimes we're so used to dealing with stuff and carrying it and burying it, and then that's just how we deal with it. We just continue to go on. And so when it comes to facing this some resistance at times, how do you handle that? How do you navigate through that with parents who maybe don't understand how seeing a counselor or a psychologist or therapist could potentially help their kids, and also parents, others, just navigate through this?
For sure. I think the main important thing for me is just building that relationship with that parent. Being in front of them, talking to them face to face, letting them know I'm not gonna be hiding behind the phone. I'm not gonna just send you a note and hopefully you sign it, that we could have a discussion. And because I'm from the same community and I get it, I'm able to have those discussions with them in a safe space where they could talk and say, you know what, I don't trust this, or I feel a way about this. And I could say, I get it. I don't even blame you, but I'm here. And because I'm here, the situation is gonna be different. And you can come talk to me. I make myself available. And I find once you do that, more times than not, there's been no issues. They're actually quite grateful to have somebody like me that's available, that they can talk to, that they can really just be honest with what they feel and not have to worry about no blowback or their child, not getting the support they need. Or worse yet, being avoided because they're that parent.
Yeah. I think there's so much challenge around that, because I know, like, even just dealing with the school system, I have children in the school system, and I get worried that they may be labeled a certain way if they act a certain way.
Mhm.
Even if you want to go for testing or something like that, you worry about, well, if they get tested and something comes up a certain way, is that going to be a problem as well? And then going to challenge them. So there's so many layers to how I think BIPOC folks may think about like counseling or other services, especially when it comes to kids as well. And then even for ourselves, right? So I know, like, where I work, we have an EAP program, and I'm constantly trying to tell people, like, you can ask for a BIPOC counselor. Sometimes the conversations that you want to have, it has that nuance around your identity that someone who's non-racialized may not be okay with getting into or know how to get into. So yeah, there's so many different layers there around seeking help, getting help, and then how to actually bring that into the work that we do as adults, like seeking out that support from the right places.
And also the impact of what happens when people don't get the support, right? Like, that's another part of this conversation, right? So we can encourage people to do it, but when they don't go for the help, what do we see? Like, you two, Aisha and Marcel, you've seen the fallout. What happens for those who just don't get the support that they need?
I think that's prevalent, and it shows up in different ways, right? First, how do you access the mental health services if, Shalima, you mentioned you have EAP. Some people in their workplace, does everybody have access to that? And if I want a counselor, how do I find one? How do I even start to find one? First of all, how do I find one? And how do I find one that resonates with me? I think, Marcel, like, you and I will probably see the same thing, that relationship, that client-therapist relationship is so important to, like, the success of your sessions. And if that doesn't exist, then it's often really hard. So I think you see, like, the different barriers that exist for people and actually getting the services. And if they don't, it translates to different things. What happens if you're trying to seek mental health services, you can't find it, you can't access it, if it's addictions, if it's whatever, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, Marcel, what do you say?
No, I totally agree with that. And I see that, like, you know, with people that are seeking that counseling or any kind of support, it's a lot easier to gain access to that support or to go for that support when you know that person is somebody that you could connect with or somebody that could relate to you. It's very, very challenging to say. And you know, I'm in the counseling world. I have lots of counseling friends, and I know they mean well. Everybody's there for a reason, and they love their job, and that's what they do. But for some, it's just difficult to and the anxiety and the worry and knowing like I got to go into the space, and maybe this person across from me has no clue what I'm going through, or no clue my background. I know that's part of building the relationship is through that, and talking to your counselor is part of that process. But it's just getting that foot in the door and accepting, you know, I need help or I need support and I want to go for it. When you have that person across from that you feel like you can relate to, it makes it that much easier. And that's where we're challenged because we don't, like you're saying, it's very hard to find that access.
Marcel, and as you were speaking, I just remembered like a client that I had in our session, our video session, she spent it taking out her hair, taking down her braids. And for her, like it was so natural for her. She was anxious about she's been anxious about like receiving services. And even though it was a few sessions in, she spent the time like taking down her hair. And it was such a big thing for her because that's the level of comfort, right? Yeah. I think about my brother who is a police officer and tells me like that relationship when parents find out that, oh, like that's a Black officer, like, okay, like, you know, it just changes the dynamics of things. So us showing up in places and spaces is so important to like, to service. It's so important.
Yeah, I sometimes when I come into work, I'll get, oh, there's a parent that wants to talk to you, and I get the warnings. Oh, this parent, she's gonna talk and she's gonna be this, and she's very confrontational, or she's difficult to work with. And you know, when I meet them and they're from the BIPOC community, I don't get that experience. But I understand why they get that experience.
Because there's walls already up.
Yeah, they leave my office, they're laughing, and you know, like, see you tomorrow, and they're like, what? Like, we barely get her to come in or he to come in. But yeah, so I definitely see that impact that I have, that being there.
Have you been able to have like these types of conversations where you can impress like the importance of actually having representation in the work that you do, so that like whether it's the schools that you work with, or Aisha, the organizations or communities that you're working with, like they understand the need to have representation of the community they're serving in these roles, whether it's counseling or whether it's even, you know, management around the services that are being provided. Actually understanding that there's a need for that.
So the organization that I currently work for, I genuinely admire, because we are open to have these kind of like difficult conversations to say like, let's look at our table and who's missing, right? We've always been open to saying like, do our staff look like the people that we're serving, right? So and it's not to say like it's always perfect in that it's evaluation, like reflection and looking and seeing like what needs to be done. Because if you have people of color who are not contacting counseling because there's nobody that looks like them, or you have people who are not seeking a certain service because there's not that representation. So I'm in a space where we talk about what that looks like. Why? Okay, so is it that we're not receiving applicants that identify as a Black, Indigenous, or person of color? What is the barrier? Why don't we have like this, whatever the representation at the table? So I feel like I've been able to do that in the space that I'm at, but this has been the first space that I've been a part of that's been open enough to have those kind of like challenging and brave conversations, because it requires change, right? Like if you've reflected, now you have to, like, what are you going to do to better it? You can't just talk about it. You have to actually be willing to change something about it.
Yeah. And often that change can have an impact on the people that are running.
Yeah.
a program, it may take away some power that some
Uh-huh.
have. So people have to be open to that if they
Exactly.
have to change. Yeah.
And I just realized, like, having that conversation one day, and I I made a comment at work that, like, the table needs to be dismantled because it wasn't created for somebody like me, which was a really big, like, statement to make, but it was the truth. Like, it wasn't like when we were fighting for, like, women's movements, like, yes, right, like, now women was at the table, but we forgot women of color, like, so I made that statement. And I recognize that this is a scary thing, because in order for, it's almost like someone has to give up a seat, right? So if we want, like, that diversity at the table, someone has to give up a seat. If we want change, you want to see the diversity in leadership, someone has to give up a seat. And who's going to do that, right? And I remember my director said to me, she's like, I will gladly give up my position, like, for somebody else to have that seat, like.
Wow.
And I thought that was like, and that's because, like, that was the depth of that conversation, and is something that I really did admire, because that's what it requires, which is scary for a lot of people because of the security, the power, the privilege that's connected to that position that is held. So change is, yes, we talk about change, but change is scary.
Well, especially if you're going to lose your position of power,
right?
If that's something that is part of your identity that you own,
right,
and love, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Marcel, you were going to say?
I was applauding for that, making that statement. That's huge. Like, this is something. In working in the school district for quite a while, I've always recognized that, yes, I'm the only Black person. And actually, this year is probably, this school, one school I'm at, is probably the first time there's actually another person of color that's teaching, which is great. But when we talk about importance and appreciation, I think there's an appreciation of this representation, but I also don't think at times there's an understanding of the importance of it. And I say that because they're great to have you there, because you're a resource. You're somebody that when uncomfortable situations come up, they can say, hey, Marcel, can you deal with this? Or, how can we deal with this situation? So they appreciate that. But I don't think they also see the importance that the impact that it has on the whole workforce, and also the people that you work with, in my case, students. Yeah, so it's more like we appreciate you here because that's one less thing we got to deal with. But I don't think they really see the significance or the importance of having diverse representation in the school.
So how do we host those conversations to move to a place of, like, especially the school? I think, like, the school system is a whole other like how do we move to a place of, like, having those conversations to understand, like, the importance of representation within, I don't want to just be in the school system because it's convenient for you, because Marcel, as you say that, like, it's also your energy, right? Like, sure. I wonder, like, how it feels to always be pushed to, like, the people who everybody else says, like, oh, they can't handle, so they, give that one to Marcel, kind of a thing. Yeah.
I pick and choose at times because, like you said, it's very draining. If I go in every day dealing with that, I would just be exhausted. So depending on certain situations, I deal with it as it comes. But there's some situations where I feel like, yes, this is an opportunity for me to step up and to do things and to make change within the school. And there's times where, I question and I'll suggest or say, like, my question in my head all the time is, what would happen if I wasn't here? And if you're true as a school and you're wanting the best for your students and you want to support all students across the board, it baffles me how that's not discussed within each school, and that there is such a reliance on the person of color to deal with that situation. I'm not in every school, and there's not a Black representation in every school. So what happens when those uncomfortable situations happen? And it is frustrating. I wish I had the answer, or so we would have that change. But I find that usually having conversations with peers, it's not our job to educate everybody, but when people are generally asking and we're having just regular conversations or share my own experiences, I find that when I share my own experiences, because I was raised here, I could share my experiences and say, like, as a kid or when I went through the school system, this is the things that I needed that wasn't there. And again, like with everything that's happened in the last year, there's a little bit more awareness, there's a little bit more education, there's more teachers saying, you know what, I'm not asking you, I'm going to learn, I'm going to try and do. And so that helps a little bit, but again, you could feel it. Yeah.
Yeah, Marcel, I think you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned it's a matter of that balance, choosing our battles that we actually want to stand up and speak about. And then unfortunately, when there's not a lot of us, we have to also preserve our energies and for ourselves, right? So we can continue to fight the battle later on, the larger ones, right? And that goes back to the whole concept of having a conversation with folks and saying, like, okay, am I just the token, Black person in the room or BIPOC person in the room? And the impact of being that only one and the labor that's on constantly put on that only one. And so again, when we look at this larger system, I think a large part of it is saying to those higher ups that, yeah, we do need more representation so that the labor is not constantly on our shoulders, right?
And you also take on, like for me, I've taken on a responsibility, like for certain situations or certain issues that I want to be discussed or shared. I also want it to be done the right way. I don't want it to be done in a way that's just like we paint the wall and then it's over. We did a good job, make the school look good or we make the district look good or whatever. So there's times where I'm like, I don't trust how it's going to be presented. So I'm taking the responsibility of doing that. Or luckily for me, I'm a counselor, so I could take in students and have those private conversations if I need to. But yeah, it's definitely balance, because you do have to take care of yourself. If you're coming home drained every day, then work doesn't feel like it's joyful and it's not what you wanted to get into in the first place, and you have kind of resentment towards I can't work today, and you're just not giving yourself 100% out there. So yeah.
I think for me, it's a lot of like self-check-in, to check in with myself to see like, because you could be asked to do something like, yes, I'll do it. But I need to like maybe take a second and check like, how am I really feeling about that? Like, is that how much energy I want to put into this thing, like this conversation or this, whatever it is at this time. So doing that self-check-in so you don't feel completely drained from the space that you're a part of.
Yeah, I think the trust piece, both trusting in others and self, is an important piece for me, at least, as well. Because I think that trust piece, it lends to me probably taking on a bit more than I should, because like to your point, Marcel, around, okay, well, is this going to be done right? And if there aren't a lot of people in the space to also contribute to it being done right, I know that I feel like I take on that pressure of it being done right. It just continues to add on to like everything else that you might be taking on is also like the responsibility for being done well, being done right, having an impact, actually making change. Yeah.
Shalima, earlier when we were chatting and you were talking, in our preamble conversation, one of the things that came up was Marcel stepping out of his comfort zone. And when we talk about doing things right and and the impact of doing things right, I was hoping, Marcel, you could share a little bit about how you stepped out of your comfort zone just recently in the work that you did and the panel you spoke on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, forever since I've been in district, I've always kind of just played my role and just dealt with each situation as it comes, but not really be out there. and really put myself out there. One, believe it or not, I don't like to public speak. I'm not a person that goes in front of a bunch of people and speak. I can do that in a private environment, but like when you put the camera on, the mic on, I kind of freeze up. So I was given an opportunity to speak on a panel discussion with Foot Locker Vancouver. And at first I just thought it was just a little group discussion, and then I found out it was actually a bigger production and it's going to be filmed and all this other stuff behind it. And so at the time a part of me was like, just say you're sick or you can't make it or whatever, back out of it. But at the same time at school, I was getting during Black History Month, and I was getting some of my Black students to speak on some heroes, both locally and internationally, and past and present and just do a presentation to the school. And they would go in front of on the PA system and say something every day. Every day they would share something or someone. And I thought it would just be these 2 students who do it for a week and then we'll find some other students. Well, they took it on and they loved it, and they did it every day for the whole month. And I saw them go from like being really uncomfortable, unsure how their peers going to treat them, how it's going to impact them, to really, really embracing it and wanting to be a part of it and loving it. And here I am in a position to do the same, and I'm thinking about backing out. And I asked myself, what does that say? What is that going to show my students? And so, I stepped out of the box and did it. I loved it. I enjoyed it. The feedback was unbelievable, and it's got me here. And it was just nice to go back and to see those same students see it and just their pride on their face. And I told them, I said, I did it because of you guys. You influenced me. And for like a 12-year-old to hear that to somebody I know that they probably look up to was very impactful. And we have a great relationship to this day, obviously. And it's one of those things, like you doubt yourself, and it probably comes from a lot of other situations and environments that you're in. But once you believe in yourself and you step out of your box and you try things, you find out it's not as bad as it seems. And it's kind of funny. It's something that I preach every day to my students. And sometimes you got to practice what you preach. So apply it to yourself.
Yeah, both of you shared stories about actually like stepping out and doing something that could be quite challenging, like Marcel taking up the space where you're not always comfortable, and like even today or in that panel. And Aisha, you talked about that moment where you said, like, look, this table wasn't built for me. And I'm sharing that truth. And like one of the things that, when it comes to like career development and like some of the things that Shelly and I focus on, you have to be able to like find that source of strength to be able to speak your truth, to be able to go after the places that you want to. So I'm curious about like, where do you get that strength from? So when you do meet those challenges in the work that you're doing, whether it's because you're speaking up as being the only one or other challenges that you might be faced, where are you drawing on to get that strength to do that?
I think for me, sorry, Marcel.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so for me, I think my strength comes from family, my relationship with God. I think those things are important to like who I am, my culture. The last year has been just a really challenging year. And during that time is when I also started this new role. And doing that in this way of working is, it was very challenging. So I think I ground myself in the things that are important to me. So like, having those supports, like families, people who you could reach out to and really like have those conversations. Like I see my sisters on the line, they know like some days where I'm like, I don't think I could do this, like, and like, having people to like, to push you and to see like, no, like, I know your strength, like you can do this, or, like having like your cheerleaders and the people who are there for you in that way. And I think that's so important in order to like be like re-energized and then go back out there the next day, right? So yeah, that's some of the places.
Yeah, it's likewise for myself. I also started to reshift my thinking. So all through especially my childhood and high school years, and even beyond that, I find myself all thinking about how other people perceive me, or how the majority population will perceive me, and you kind of shy away. they might not understand, or they might view you some other kind of way, or whatever it is, but it gets in your head and it brings in a lot of doubt. What I started doing is less about them and more about the people who are like me. And once I start thinking like that, I start seeing, like, people, I'm not the only one. And by me sharing my voice will help resonate and connect with a lot of other people and make it feel okay to talk about it. I find like even when I'm talking here, I feel like I'm talking to us, and it makes it a lot more comfortable. And as I do it, as I see the impact, that's what I also think about. I don't think about in the moment. I think about how is this going to impact others, and how is it going to bring light to different situations. And again, at the end of the day, it's my passion. It's something that's very important to me. So if I can't speak about it, then what is that? Like, I need to share that passion. And once I see like-minded people that have the same passion, it's again strength in numbers, and you feel more confident. Yeah, I've been this whole last year, I kind of made a promise to myself that, to do these things and to step up and to speak your mind and to share your passion and share things. And I realized the more I've done it, the more I've connected, and the more that there's other people like me that feel the same way. So yeah, it's a mind game thing, right? And so once you overcome that, and you said you have support with your family, you have support from friends who truly, truly believe in you, and applaud you when you do these things, it makes it so much easier, opposed to being ridiculed or just people not wanting to care or pay attention.
Yeah, I mean, that sense of community, like, and no matter like where you're building that community, I find is so important to be able to like lean on in those times when you need someone to actually see you fully and see fully what it is that you're doing, see fully your potential. Those are so key. And I like what I'm finding is that there's so many people experiencing the same thing, but because there hasn't been that comfort to talk about it or that community space to talk about it, they may not. And so like if you keep it in and you feel like you're the only one, then that other person who's now like just the two of you, you may not ever have this real conversation about what's really happening, and then change can't be impacted because no one's willing to. So the more that like I know that I can be vulnerable about what I've gone through, that may space for someone else to see, okay, I can also share that as well. I've had that same thing happen to me.
I also want to applaud you guys for and grateful for you guys having this platform, because again, there's opportunities that come up, but then you question, what is this platform representing? Do I feel safe talking on this platform? Am I being used, or they really genuinely care? And the two platforms that I have spoken on, I felt comfortable in those situations. I felt like the people that were putting on genuinely wanted to see change and genuinely cared about what I had to bring to the table, not just we need you Black representation or for whatever reason. But no, I definitely appreciate this opportunity. So thank you guys.
Absolutely, I echo that. I do as well. I haven't been a part of a platform like this before, where it talks about professionals, the challenges, the things that we might not have other people like ourselves in the spaces that we're part of to kind of talk about, bringing those things forward, and then seeing that you're not the only one, and trying to figure out ways around that.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's important. When Shalima and I were chatting last summer, and we saw what was happening around the world, that was part of our conversation. We were so tired of hearing other people speak on our behalf and not being at the table. And I remember us saying, you know what, let's create our own table. Let's create our own platform. Like we're fully capable of doing this. So with our backgrounds in communications and all that good stuff, we said, well, let's just do it. Let's take the dive and let's make it happen. We know enough people and see how it kind of rolls out, because there is so much of a need to have these safer spaces where we can speak openly, honestly. Our comments and our stories are validated. They're not silenced. They're actually like, people, it resonates with folks. And it's like, okay, I'm not alone. Okay, yeah, it happens here, there, this province, that province, and the other province. It's not an isolated incident, right? So and it's encouraging when we hear, oh wow, you're doing this, you're doing that. Oh, I never thought I could, I've never met a Black person who does this or that or the other. So these are some of the reasons behind why we decided to do what we're doing. And so thank you so much for joining us again. We're not ending right this second, but
Shalima's like
it's definitely encouraging, like you be able to share stories and see people nodding their head in agreement or understanding, because I'll speak for myself, but I do have conversations with others and from different backgrounds, and they might not understand it, or they might not see it, or they never experienced it, and they might think it's a one-off, or are you sure you're not reading into it too much, like those kinds of and that's very, very deflating when you finally find the courage and find the energy to share with others and to say, this is my experience, I'm telling you this so you can understand me more. And then they look at you and say, come on, man, like I think you're reading into too much, or you're sensitive, or come on, we all go through stuff, deal with it.
Dust your shoulders off.
Yeah, you just leave that situation so deflated that you're like, I'm not going to talk about this again. Like I can't go through that again.
Yeah.
So you might see my head missing. I just realized I'm not plugged in.
I think that's, what you've raised there, Marcel, around like just validating someone's experience is so key, or like that second guessing of whether what I think is happening, is that really happening? And I recently had a conversation with a colleague who was coaching a person of color. And, my colleague, they come from, a white background or European background, but they recognize what was happening, and they could see that, what this person was going through with their manager was actually a racist incident. And, they're like, I think this is what I'm seeing. I'm calling it out. And sometimes you actually have people who are white can see it even more plainly than the person of color, because if they're in that space where like, I know what's going on, they can call it what it is. And sometimes as a person of color, you may be like, no, maybe I am being too sensitive, or maybe like, I know I come from, my parents come from Trinidad. It's like, no, you just work through it. Like you work harder. Like you don't worry about these things that are happening to you, right? You just put your head down, you do work, and you'll get rewarded. And so sometimes you get that, like that struggle between, is what I think happening really happening, or do I just need to work harder? Do I need to ignore this or not? And so sometimes you have allies that could actually see it before you do. Yeah, so it's interesting, like that balance between like actually acknowledging that those microaggressions might be happening or not, and then being in that space where it's bothering you but you don't know what to do about it.
I think at times you feel it, but it's a feeling. So when you try to put it in words, it seems like, well, where's the proof kind of thing? And often we might not feel confident enough to speak on it because we don't have enough evidence, or it's that feeling like I want to say something, but I gotta make sure. Let me make sure, and because that if you say it and you say something and it's not what it is, that could just ruin everything for a long time. So you want to be sure of it, but I think deep down, if you feel it, it's probably there. It's probably.
But I think the thing is, when we recognize that it's there, it's like, what do we do with it, right? Oftentimes, like if I recognize, okay, now I definitely know that this is not right, but what do I do with it? Because I still need to go back to that place tomorrow. I still have to work, all these things. What do I do with it? So actually taking time to reflect and to really see that this is happening to me is also a weight that I have to now carry, because what am I going to do with it? Having allies that like recognize people that recognize that this is actually happening, I think that is where they are on their journey. They were, they had to have been open to seeing these things. So however everyone's traveling on that anti-racist journey is impacting me, because you speaking up and saying, hey, like I realize this, that could do a lot for somebody like me, because I might not have the energy to do that in every single space for however long I've been going through this, right? Yeah,
absolutely. We've got a couple questions in the chat, and I think we'll actually start with the second one first, because I think it ties into what you were just saying. And that's how do people in leadership positions within this community unpack their privilege or positions of power, and what would be suitable metrics to measure this? So either one of you that would like to take that one, and then we'll take the other question right after.
Oh, that's a big one. I've got to actually open this. How do people in leadership positions within this community unpack their privilege and power? I think it starts with conversations. It starts with reflections. It starts with awareness. If we don't have those spaces and places where these conversations are happening, the people who are benefiting from these things, they continue to benefit. And why would why would I want to recognize this if it means that I have to lose something, I have to do, you know what I mean? So I think those places and spaces where we can actually talk and you're ready to receive and to listen, and not to listen and tell me that like, oh, I don't think that was it. You must have probably, you didn't hear properly, or it could have been this, but to listen, to hear, and to understand my experience. That is probably, I think, the first, and then like an intentional journey, right? So like holding people accountable, you as a leader, or the leaders, wherever it is that we work, them intentionally being on a journey to becoming like, yeah, anti-racist. That's how I see it.
Actually, you hit it right. Yeah, perfect. Like, because as you're saying it, I'm hearing the conversations that I have at work, and yeah, it's like, are you really hearing me, or are you just saying yeah, or that's not it, or advocating, or making excuses or justifying whatever? It's like, I'm telling you because it's important. I'm telling you because there's a need to be heard. And often it's like, yeah, or I don't think that's it. Maybe it might be this, and try to shift my thinking. No, I'm telling you because you're not aware of this, and you need to be aware of this. And
right.
The intent needs to be genuine. The implementation needs to be genuine. So.
Absolutely. And then when we are ourselves in those leadership positions, I think it's really important that we continue to open up more doors for more folks to come in. We can't just occupy that power and be like, ooh, I'm here, good, right? Like, we need to continue to do the work so that more representation can be in there, because that will then lighten the load from our backs as well.
Exactly.
Right?
I would love to come into my work field and see something done and be like, wow, I learned something from that. Like, wow, can I bore that? Like, can I use that? It's, yeah, often, unfortunately, I don't see that as often, but it would be nice and to see that where leadership genuinely cares and genuinely is intentional with their impact, with what they want to do. So.
And I think the challenge sometimes is that, like recognizing where we also hold privilege, the fact that we are able to have this conversation here because we hold jobs that us, and that we're able to actually have access to internet and our own laptops, and like all of us have gone through a certain amount of school to be able to be in the positions that we hold now too. So that comes with its own amount of privilege, and for us as BIPOC folks to like see that as well, it means that we can then see where there's people in our community that don't have that privilege.
Exactly.
And be able to extend that outwards as well. And I know, like, and sometimes it's like this, when the spotlight is on you, you worry about, is someone going to think that I'm doing something because I'm favoriting my group or whatnot? But we have to kind of get over that feeling. And know when we're actually extending a hand out to support others in the same way that everybody else does. And sometimes, like, if people don't have access to those supports, those communities, those networks, we might be that network. And so be able to be in it and be okay with being in it.
Absolutely.
That's what I've kind of told myself at work. Like, I feel the vibe, like when I have a Black student in my room, they might be feeling like, oh, he's paying attention to him only because he's Black or whatever. But I've come to realize, like, what is my job? My job is to support the students in all capacity, and all diverse students. And so I could justify why that student's in my room. I could justify why I'm talking to that student and the discussions we're having or the support I'm providing. And I've gotten to a point where I'm comfortable in my position. I feel confident in my position and deserving of my position. So if anybody has a problem with it, I really don't care anymore. Like it's one of those things where I've had to just say, you know what, you can't care, and you got to do what you got to do. And
Marcel, like I think about like as you say that, like how many Black people of color have the opportunity to interact with or even has had like a Black teacher or a counselor within how often is that student going to get that opportunity to interact with somebody like you, right? Versus a white student, like the likelihood of them like that we know that's what it is. But for a Black student or person of color, like Indigenous person, having that representation, like how often is it that you're going to see someone in the school system that looks like you, that that is able to connect with you in that way? Like for me, I didn't have my first Black teacher until I went to like university, right? It took like that long for me to see like somebody like me in that way.
I'm
so yeah. You're still waiting?
I've been going to school for a long time and I'm still waiting. I got my teachers within my community, so it's all good.
Yeah.
I think we can try to sneak in this one last question before we kind of close out, because it ties into exactly what we were talking about, the topic of school, which is I've never, in the context of I've never seen a Black person do this in the school system. Do you see instances of teachers pushing Black or BIPOC students to or away from certain professions? I know in Toronto there was the whole streamlining, right?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, because I work in the elementary system or elementary setting, it's I don't see it pushed away, but I also don't see it pushed forward. And so it's kind of like left on that student. I personally, when I talk to my students and we have discussions about whether it's professions or what you see yourself or who you see yourself as, I definitely have that discussion where, honestly, you could be anything you want to be. You don't have to be a certain way. It's a very important discussion to have with students, especially for the BIPOC community, because as they grow up, they're laced with so many different stereotypes. They're presented with so many different stereotypes. They're perceived with so many different stereotypes. And it's not just their peers, it is with the adults within they work with, it's within the community. So I've been through it, and to know that like when you go through those years and years of how people perceive you to be and how people perceive how you're supposed to be and you're going to be, there comes a time where you start to accept it or believe it, or worse yet, embrace it. And I think that's why it's so important for me, like to talk about things like this and to be visually out there, because when kids see me doing it, they realize, oh, I could do what you do, or I could do something else. And it's very, very powerful. And it's hitting kids even at an earlier age. Like when I was 12, I was playing with toys and I wasn't really paying attention to all that stuff until I got to high school. That's when all the stereotypes and everything just hit me at once. But it's with social media, with internet, with access like that, kids at a young age are being presented with it. And I talk to the students and they know what stereotypes, like I'm talking like 10-year-olds know exactly what stereotypes are. They know what they're perceived to be. They know what their representation is. And what's scary is you're seeing a lot of kids who come from different countries who newly immigrate here. They don't even know that experience of racism or being the only one. And all of a sudden they're hit with all these stereotypes and they don't even know the negativity behind it. And they just accept it. And so again, it really sucks because it's just me in one school or two schools, and I can have these conversations with these students very, very vividly and have that conversation with them and get them to see clearly, like, you don't have to be these stereotypes. You could be anything you want to be. You have the ability to be anything you want to be, and you should embrace that. And whatever your things are, just do that. But I don't think those conversations are being had all the time because I'm aware of it. I'm fully aware. I experience it. So it really hits me. I'm passionate about it. But for some who have not had that experience, who are privileged enough to have that experience, It's just a word you say. You can be anything you want to be, but don't really go in depth with it, what that really means and what they're facing at that time.
So I'd say my experience within the school system was different. I think during my time, it was really where counselors kind of streamline like the Black kids. So you would go into like the general classes and you would see like all like, you know, the Black and people of color advanced classes was like, you know, and that's what you needed to take to get to university. So that created like additional barriers. And then depending on like your parents' understanding of what the school system is like the impact of taking one course versus another, meaning that you could go to college or you could go to university, meaning that you could become this or you could become that. And like people who are new to newcomers and that whole understanding of those things. So I did experience those things. And so like, I think a part of my work is also like, how do we do better? How do we like have conversations with school systems to share experiences? And I think there's been that research to show like what racialized people go through within the school system and the change that needs to happen. But yeah, we need to be a part of those conversations to share because it is right. We're living it.
We could probably keep going on this, but we've come to the end of our time. And as a tradition that Shell and I have for how we close out these sessions is we have a signature question that we have to ask you. So we'd like to know your thoughts on this. Are you a red wine or
a white wine
or a fast wine
or a slow wine? And why?
If you give me enough red and white, I think I can do both.
Nice answer.
I'm a slow wine. I like to enjoy. Yeah, just enjoy.
Awesome.
In this day and age, if we could just get wine and have a wine, then
I know. But any kind of wine at this point. So awesome.
Thank
you. Such a beautiful conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for those who stayed for this conversation, and those who were able to submit a few questions in there. Thank you again. You know, it validates the importance of the work that we're doing. So thank you so much.
So please, connect with us however you'd like to. We will be posting this video for anyone who couldn't attend as well on YouTube. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time. So say your outs or goodbyes, and we'll be in touch soon.